are so honored to have with us Professor Mordechai Kedar, a world expert on Arabic culture. Speaks Arabic fluently as he does Hebrew, English, Yiddish. He served in the Israeli Military Intelligence for more than 25 years. He is the only Israeli pundit that gets aired on Arabic media to hear an Israeli defend Israel. And they let him. That's what I would like to find out, why. The one leading the conversation needs no introduction. That's my wife, Devorah, who in her own right gives her weekly class on Zoom that attracts women from Europe and all parts of the United States come and listen to her every single week. So we're in for a great treat. I want to thank pillar of our community, Mr. Murray Dolphin, for being instrumental in making all of this happen tonight. Thank you so much. And to Professor Kedar, I say to you, Yasher Koyach, Tuda Rabah, thank you so much, Hashem Dank, and in Arabic, Shukran. Without further ado, Devorah and Professor Kedar.
For over 25 years, our guest tonight served in the IDF Military Intelligence as a senior officer and specialized in Arab culture, political discourse, and mass media. Today, he directs the Center for the Study of the Middle East and Islam, a research associate of the Begin Sadat Center for Strategic Studies, and he's a lecturer at the Department of Arabic at Bar-Ilan University in Israel. Our guest is fluent in Arabic, Hebrew, and English, and he is frequently interviewed in the Israeli, Arab, and international media. Most recently, and I think he comes here pretty much right off the heels of this, he addressed the European Parliament in Brussels, Belgium, on the subject of Iran. He is one of the most sought-out speakers on current events in the Middle East, and he lectures around the globe. He has spoken extensively, and I've seen his list. It is really, really long. Throughout the United States, Canada, Europe, and Africa. And tonight, he is here with us in conversation at the Chabad of Westmount Irwin Beutel lecture series in memory of Irwin Beutel. So ladies and gentlemen, please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Mordechai Kedar. So I would like to welcome and honor as well your dear wife, who is in the audience, who's here with us today. And Devorah Kedar, where are you? Could you raise your hand? Oh, here, right in front of us. Yes, thank you.
She deserves it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to say, as we all know, that the strength of the Jewish family, and therefore by extension, the Jewish people, is the Jewish woman. And so a special welcome to you, Devorah Kedar. I want to thank also, at this point, Mr. Murray Dolphin, who is a close friend and one of the main benefactors at Chabad of Westmount, and he made this talk possible. He helped arrange it. And when he told us, when Murray did tell us that you are available for the talk, rather, Rabbi Yossi and myself basically perused through the many choices and topics that you address, and we could not decide what to choose. We were like the kid in the candy store. Like, what do we choose? There were so many vital issues that you address. You speak and write prolifically on a whole host of pressing issues, including internal Jewish issues, Israel and its neighbors, anti-Semitism, Jerusalem, our history, our future, solving the Arab conflict, and so on. So it was really hard to choose just one. So instead, what I will try to do with your help is we're going to try to taste a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and hopefully also get to know you on a personal level. So with that, let me begin with my first question. So Dr. Kedar, for over 25 years, you served the IDF Military Intelligence as a senior intelligence officer specializing in Arab culture, political discourse, and mass media. Now, I've seen you, not that I know Arabic, but you seem to be a pretty fluent Arab speaker, and famously, you have interviewed extensively in the Arab media in Arabic, including on Al Jazeera. Now, Israel has a large population of Jews that have immigrated from Arabic-speaking countries, and in Montreal we are fortunate to have a whole segment of Jews that come from those countries, and they have enriched our lives immeasurably. And watching your interviews online, I have to say, I always assumed, with the name Kedar, could be like an Iraqi name, I don't know, that you grew up in a home where Arabic was spoken, and that you got your start from there. But since then, I've learned that that's not the case, not at all, that your parents' background are Ashkenazi Jews. So can you share with us, how does an Ashkenazi Jew become one of Israel's leading Arabic-speaking experts on the Arabic mindset and culture? And I heard a rumor, and please confirm if this is true, that Yiddish is your mama lashon.
Yes. Well, first of all, let me thank Rabbi Yossi and Rebitzin for arranging this evening to Murray, Dolphin for enabling it, and of course, my dear wife. For her, this is the first visit in Canada. But by the way, she was born in New York and grew up in Brookline, Massachusetts, not far from here. I visited Montreal first time in 1965, and we actually spent a week with the Vinograds. I remember her name, Bonia. I don't remember his name, but their daughter Sherry Beraznik lives today in Toronto, so in Markham. So I meet with, ladies and gentlemen, this is my little biography. As for your question, no surgeon was born with a knife. Am I right?
Yeah, 100%.
People learn and they acquire all kinds of things like languages or know-how, and they die by the knife at some point, and they become surgeons. Okay? The same thing with languages, the same thing with cultures. You have to learn, to study, and here you are. Yes, my mother tongue is Yiddish. My parents, both sides, are Polish. They came to Palestine in the 30s, and before the First World War. This is why I exist. Otherwise, you know. But yeah, and I went to high school, to Zeitlin, means Tichon Ironi Bet in Tel Aviv, and there was a teacher of Arabic, Dov Iron, a guy from Germany, a Yeki, who spoke perfect Arabic, and by the way, he was a spy for the British in the beginning of the 40s in Egypt. He used to invite the German officers of Rommel, you know, the Corpus Africanus of Rommel, to the bars of Alexandria. He would drench them, not with Coca-Cola, and get them to sing. Means to give all the secrets. He used to go home and send them by code to the British headquarters in Eretz Israel. And apparently this is one of the reasons of the victory of the British on the Corpus Africanus of Rommel in 1942 in El Alamein. Otherwise, they would occupy the whole Middle East, including the oil of the Gulf, and establish crematoria near the Carmel. in order to get rid of the Jewish population in Eretz Israel. This was their plan. So apparently, my Arabic teacher, in the beginning of the 40s, was a vital link in this victory of the British over the Nazi army in North Africa. And the Jewish population of Eretz Israel was saved, apparently thanks to him and his ability to, with German. After all, he was from Germany, so he could correspond with or to talk to the German officers fluently and get all the information for them after spending on them some booze. And this is actually what happened. And we fell in love, a group of 13 kids fell in love with him. He was a great teacher. We studied Arabic in lessons of Arabic. We studied Arabic in lessons of mathematics, of Talmud, of whatever. And at the end of the Tichon, of the high school, we could already read parts of the Quran, very high level. We read newspapers, we read articles, we read classic literature, modern literature. My students in Bar Ilan, when they finished BA, they are not in this level. As we finished high school, to that degree. And of course, we went to the army, to the intelligence, since we know Arabic, en bloc. And I was in the army 25 years in Chovah Vekeva, in compulsory service and professional service. I finished as a Rosh Anaf, as the head of a branch in 8200 unit, which is high-tech surveillance unit. And since then I serve in Miluim, in reserve until this very day, in the Central Command. So this is very short. Meanwhile, I did my BA in the early 80s and my PhD in the early 90s. And I finished it in 1998. And since then I was teaching, since 1994 I was already teaching at Bar Ilan. And this is in very short my biography. In 75 I got married with Raina because in addition to Arabic I love classical music. So Raina came on Aliyah a few years earlier and she joined the Philharmonic Choir. She's a great singer, a great soprano. And I used to go to concerts. I saw her on the stage. So I joined the choir. and all the rest is kids and history. And those days I was a lyric tenor. Today I'm a tragic bass. But I still love to listen to her. And we do harmonize on Zmirot Shabbat. And our 5 kids are all carry tunes, and it's okay. This has been very short. My parents are from Poland, yes.
That is really fascinating, and I think it speaks to the cultural mix that Israel is and the surprise that you're going to find, in Israel. So given your vast knowledge about the Arabic mindset, as Westerners, even though we're Jews, and we live, very much connected to the land of Israel, our grasp of Arab culture is peripheral and most likely very superficial, or at least superficial. As an expert in this area, this is your canvas. What do you think the average Western person fails to understand, or to understand correctly, about the Middle East, the Arab culture, and the prevalent mindset there? And what do we need to understand better, if possible?
First of all, the human being in 97% of the Arab world is part of not only a nuclear family, father, mother, children. He is a member of a clan. He or she will not marry anyone without the consent of her or his uncles, means the brothers of the father and the brothers of the mother. If they do not agree to the marriage, you don't get married. And they have all kinds of cheshbonot with the family of the candidate. Okay? And in many facets of life, the clan, sometimes it's a tribe, has what to say about everything. You, especially if you are a lady, you are always under the microscope, not only a magnifier, a microscope of the family, which checks what you wear, how you speak, how you act, with whom you go out, and especially with whom you befriend. You are not alone, you are not an individual, you are part of a clan. And the clan actually watches you to make sure that you don't bring shame on the family. Men could also bring shame, but women, the shame is even bigger. This is one thing, different from Western societies. Second thing is the fact that each and everyone, especially if he or she is a Muslim, cannot denounce Islam, cannot leave the tradition, cannot behave against what others deem as important because of the religious tradition. The tradition is imposed on the people, and if you try to leave Islam, you better leave the country before, because somebody who leaves Islam, denounces that he leaves Islam, usually he puts in danger the connection between his head and shoulders. It's not funny, it is lethal. Okay? And this is why liberalism in the Islamic world is a bad word, because it means that everybody can do whatever he or she likes, everybody can say what he or she likes, and everybody can behave in any way which he or she wants. This is totally unacceptable in these societies. Westerners do not get it, because Westerners think from their own mindset. Westerners, I'm talking about Canadians, Americans, and many cases Israelis as well, those who made mistakes when it comes to the Arab world and the Middle East, not to mention Western Europeans, all think from the same, or more or less the same cultural point of view, and they cannot understand that there are people, millions of people, especially in the Middle East, who think in a different way, behave in different. The scale of priorities in the Middle East is different. The set of values is different. The mindset is different. And if you don't learn about these people's mindset, set of values, and scale of priorities, the chance that you make mistakes with them is more or less 100%, if not more. And this is actually what happened in the Middle East, and this is one of the reasons of the atrocities of the Middle East, which we see today in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Libya, in Yemen. All these atrocities in the Middle East are the result of the attempts of Europeans, British and French, to establish states based on the European paradigm of a state, while these societies act, think according to totally different culture. And this is why these states are failing states. Lebanon has witnessed already 2 civil wars. Syria is a swamp of blood, tears, and fire. Iraq is the same. Libya is the same. Yemen is the same. Only because these states were established according to Western ideas. The Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar are flourishing countries, not because of the oil. Dubai has no oil and no gas. Dubai is business. Iraq has a lot of oil. Libya has a lot of oil, and there are failing states. So what makes the good life in the Gulf? The fact that each and every one of these countries is based on the culture, means everyone is one tribe, one clan. Kuwait is Al Sabah, is the name of the tribe which owns actually Kuwait. Qatar is Al Thani, is the name of the clan. Dubai is Al Maktoum. Abu Dhabi is Al Nahyan. Okay? And Saudi Arabia, Al Saud. Okay? This is the family. And when there is a state based on a family, this is the culture of the Middle East. People here might look at this as something, what? Excuse me, what? The state of the family? Yes! In the Middle East, this is the only thing which works. When you establish states like liberal states, as Syria was in the 50s, or later communism and socialism came, the Ba'ath parties, and what happened in Egypt, the Egyptian Arab socialism, these, socialism, they didn't know even how to spell the word socialism in Arabic. So let alone the ideas. This way, these countries cannot function. And this is why they became swamps of blood and tears. And this is unfortunately when Westerners make mistakes in the Middle East, and the cost is blood, unfortunately.
So would you say, let's say the Bush Doctrine was very much predicated on the idea of bringing freedom, and that was why it failed?
I'm talking about states which are established already in the previous century. Look, the last one to be liberated was the Emirates in 1970-71. The United in 71. Beforehand, 1962 is Algeria. Beforehand, 1943 is Iraq and Lebanon. Beforehand, Egypt started its path to independence already in the beginning of the 19th century when Napoleon invaded Egypt. So, yes, these countries already live as states, independent states, already decades. Yet, they failed in galvanizing the society to be one nation, because they are highly fragmented according to clan axis or ethnic lines. Look, Syria has Arabs, Kurds, Turkmens, Armenians, 4 ethnic groups. Iraq are Kurds, Arabs, Turkmens, Persians, divided to 70-something tribes. Iraq has 10 religions. I'm more than sure that the Canadian media never mentions it. But in Iraq there are Muslims, Christians, there are some Jews in Basra, Yazidis, those who were slaughtered by ISIS, Zoroastrians, Shubaks, Sabais, Mandays, and Druze and Alawis who ran away from Syria, and I'm not sure that is the end of the list. And so these are religions. Some of them are divided to sects. The Muslims are divided between Sunnah and Shia and Salafis and Sufis and all kinds of others. And the Christians, when they were still in Iraq, before they all ran away, there were 6 different denominations, Chaldees, Syriacs, and others. And the British, when they established Iraq 100 years ago, modern Iraq, they hoped that with the years, everybody will abandon its traditional belonging to the tribe or the ethnic group or the religious or the sectarian group. They will all get married with each other, marry each other, will all become one nation, and they will sit around one fire and sing Kumbaya together. This is what the British hoped. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. Arabs remained loyal to their Arab tradition, Kurds remained loyal to their tradition, Sunnah remained Sunnah, Shia remained Shia, Muslims remained Muslims, Christians remained Christians, even Jews remained Jews, and so forth. And they don't get married with each other. So there is no Iraqi nation. There are Iraqi citizens, but not a nation. Because everyone takes care of his own group, while the others are the enemies. And this is, unfortunately, how people look at each other in Iraq. This is why Iraq is a failing state. The same thing is with Syria, which I wrote my PhD about it. I wrote my PhD about the attempts of the Syrian regime to convince the people that they are one nation. Look at Syria today. If they had a consciousness of one nation, they wouldn't kill each other the way they do. Okay? Lebanon is almost on the verge of civil war, because the Sunni and the Shia and the Christians and the Alawis and the Druze hate each other and fight each other, and they have a long history of slaughtering each other. So all of a sudden, because they have the papers of Lebanon, they became brothers and sisters. This is what the French tried. It didn't work. And this is why these countries are failing states. Why? Homogeneous states like Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, each and every one of them is one group. These are normal states. And life is, in these countries are in heaven. I wouldn't say that they are democracies, but in the Middle East, democracy is something which is viewed as something strange. Because what is democracy? Democracy between you and me. Democracy is a cake. What are the ingredients of this cake? Freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom from religion, freedom of assembly, rule of the law. What else? Elections? Okay, all these components, all these ingredients of this cake create allergy in Islamic societies. The very basic components of democracy are either totally or almost totally unacceptable in Islamic societies. So creating democracy or bringing democracy to the Middle East means that you want to change the system from Android to iPhone. Can it work? Okay, so whoever understands that if you have a phone with Android, you'll never be able to operate it with iOS, means with the
Apple operating system.
with the operating system of iPhone. You can understand. If you understand this, you can understand why the Middle East cannot work with a system which was invented in the West, for the West, by the West, according to the traditions and the values of the West. Okay, this is simple. Yet, people don't get it.
So this actually brings me to the next question. You're on record as not supporting a two-state solution, and in fact, you have your own solution, what you call an 8-state solution. So can you elaborate why you don't support a two-state solution? And I'm guessing it has to do with what you just mentioned now, or a little bit on part of it, and what your 8-state solution is, and why you think that would be more successful in solving the conflict with the Arab population within Israel.
Well, two-state solution means to take all the clans of the Palestinian population, including Gaza, and to put them around on fire and telling them to sing Kumbaya together. This is actually the same mistake of the British in Iraq, the French in Syria and Lebanon, and the Italians, by the way, in Libya. Because all these European countries were the midwives of these Arab countries. The same thing is with the Palestinians. They are highly fragmented according to clan lines. If you tell me the name of somebody, I'll tell you where he lives. Because one of the rules of clanism is that you live with your clan. You don't go to another clan to live there, because in your place, homeland, that's how they define homeland, you feel at home because you are surrounded by your clan. If you cross the street and you go to live with another clan, you are mushmin in Arabic. You know what it means? Nicht von unser. It's the same thing. Nicht von, not one of us. If you cross the street and you go to live in another clan, you will always be looked upon as somebody who invaded their space. And they will let you feel that you are not one of us. And this is unfortunately what happens in the Middle East. And this is the culture. And if you don't understand it, and you take clans and you put them together and say, okay, get along with each other, the most chances that we not get along with each other. This is why to create one Palestinian state is the same mistake of Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, Libya, Yemen, Algeria. Therefore, I came out with a solution which works in the Middle East, which is the clan solution. Just like the Emirates in the Gulf. An emirate in Hebron for the group of clans in Hebron which live together nicely, peacefully for centuries already. The Jabri, Kawasme, Nache, Tamimi, Abu Snena, they have a court, a tribal court, which assembles every time that there is some kind of dispute between two clans, and they solve the problem within 1 hour. They do, within 1 hour, and oy va'avoy to whoever doesn't obey what they decide. Their power is way much bigger than the power of the PA, or the Palestinian Authority, which has no rule over Hebron. Because Hebron is a very traditional society. The same thing in Jericho. There is another tribe in Jericho named Arikat. Ramallah, 3 different tribes from those. Barghouti, Abu Ain, and Tawil. Tawil, by the way, are Christians. And they get along together very nicely for centuries. Another one, emirate in Shechem, Nablus, for the clans of Nablus, Masri, Tukan, and Shakar. Same thing in Tulkarem, the Karmis, and so forth in Kalkilia and Jenin. Israel should remain forever in the rural areas and offer Israeli citizenship to the villagers, while the cities will be independent, just like the Emirates in the Gulf. Because this is the only thing which works well in the Middle East. This is, based on sociology, not on dreams.
I guess because it doesn't fit into the paradigm and things that are very neat and fit into good boxes.
Look, those who understand it,
Yes.
support it. Too many people, especially in Israel, don't get it. Also because they are liberal people, they think from their own point of view, and they project their mindset, liberal, modern, individualistic, they project it on the others, as if they behave, think just like us. And this is the mistake.
So we're speaking before about the Gulf states, and fascinating development that we all have been experiencing and witnessing is the shift that seems to be taking place in the Arab Gulf states vis-a-vis Israel, namely, of course, the Abraham Accords, which, as we know, are a series of treaties which normalize diplomatic relations between Israel, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Sudan, and now Morocco. Indeed, today I was reading that the Moroccan King Mohammed VI has invited Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to visit Morocco, and that'll be the first visit of an Israeli head of state to Morocco. So I know for myself, and I'm sure many of you in the audience may feel the same way, the Abraham Accords, when it happened, seemed to me at least almost messianic in its nature. The premise that a Jew and Arab evokes the name of Abraham, our father, to create a covenant of peace. There's something very romantic about that. And what was different, it seemed to me anyway, as a Chabad girl, was that until now, all the treaties that Israel needed to sign seemed to be predicated on some way on a land for peace model. In other words, that Israel gives up land in exchange for peace. And here was a treaty that I felt kind of reflected the Talmudic dictum, Zenene, Zenene, Zelo Chaser, Zelo Chaser, each gains without losing, and it's good for all. So in your opinion, and with your understanding of the Arabic trends, do you see the Abraham Accords as an anomaly, a blimp in history, or do you think it reflects a new way towards the future, a new paradigm that will be predicated not only on what Israel gives up, but also on mutually beneficial economic and diplomatic ties. And in that case, how does Saudi Arabia fit into that picture?
Israel's relations with the Arab world. First of all, we have to mention that Israel has already peace with Egypt since 1979, which is what, 44 years. Okay, so this is definitely something which we cannot ignore. Secondly, with Jordan, since 1994, October 1994.
29 years.
So this is, I was in the background of the Abraham Accords today with the Emirates and others. So that's one thing. Second thing, what we can mention here is that the peace with Egypt and Jordan is what we call in Hebrew cold peace. Means peace which includes embassies, cooperation on security, little cooperation about economy. Tourism was and doesn't exist anymore, and more or less this is the whole thing. Not cultural aspects of peace, not academic cooperation, not investments, nothing. Very cold, limited peace. Yet, as my late mother used to say, the worst peace is better than the best war. Okay? So even though this peace with Egypt and Jordan is partial peace, yet it is better than being in war with these countries. Okay. Having said that, the new Abraham Accords are different because this is, I would say, an all-out peace with everything: investments, banking, tourism, arts, whatever, except for one thing: religious issues. There are no religious, of course, there are rabbis who serve in, by the way, a friend of mine, Rabbi Eli Abadi, who used to be the rabbi of the Safra synagogue in the 63rd Street in East Side in New York. He now is the rabbi in Dubai. The rabbi of Dubai, officially. Okay? So when he got the nomination, I called him and said, Rabbi Eli, this is good. Now you are 3 hours flight from Israel rather than 11 from New York. Okay. And so definitely there are good relations between Israel and the Emirates and Bahrain and Morocco. Sudan is on the way because today there is a civil war in Iran, in Sudan. But until the civil war erupted 2 months ago, there was a big dispute in Sudan between the military and the civil government about this peace. The military was for it, and the civil side of the government was against it. So, but now they are fighting each other. So, anyway, it's not on the table now. What happened is that the Emirates and their friends don't or never had any borders with Israel. We never had wars with them. We never had people. Not only this, the Mossad had an official representation in the Emirates for over 20 years. The majority of the population of Bahrain are Persians, Shia, governed by a minority of Arabs, Sunnah, who were brought by the British. Okay? So this is Bahrain. Okay, this is why once in a while we hear about demonstrations in Bahrain. Because the majority of the people do not like the government, and the government made peace with Israel. What do you think, that the majority of the people like this peace? Not at all, because they think like Iranians, or like Persians, Shia. Okay? By the way, in Jordan there's the same problem, because in Jordan the majority are Palestinians, and they view the peace with Israel, which was signed by the king, as some kind of a knife in their back. Okay? This is in Jordan. So we have a peace with the government, not with the people. And this, another characteristic of the Middle East, which people here usually don't understand. So, this is the another thing which we should all remember, that the one who pushed the Emirates to sign publicly the peace with Israel or the agreements with Israel was President Trump. For him, it was some kind of achievement. He wanted to show that he can make peace, just like President Clinton, who was the sponsor of the Oslo agreements between Israel and Palestinians. Okay? So he wanted also to show that he knows how to bring peace. So he is the one who maintained pressure on the Emiratis in order to sign the peace with Israel. He failed with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia did not sign anything with Israel, at least not publicly, because Saudi Arabia suffered from the Iranians. It was the early morning of September 14, 2019. September 14, 2019. 4 o'clock a.m. on that day, the Iranians attacked two big facilities of Aramco, the oil production company of Saudi Arabia, and they paralyzed some 50% of the ability of the Saudis to export oil for months. And for Saudi Arabia, it was a big damage. The Saudis couldn't do anything because Saudi Arabia is a weak country. They are rich, but they are weak. They could not defeat the Houthis in Yemen for more than 8 years of bloody war. Imagine that Israel had to fight the Hezbollah in Lebanon for 8 years. Okay? This is how weak the Saudis are. They have the state-of-the-art of weapons in the world, bought from the Americans, and they do not know how to operate these weapons. And this is why Saudi Arabia is afraid of Iran. This is why Saudi Arabia did not sign anything with Israel, especially not publicly. They allowed, or maybe even encouraged, the Emirates to do this, Bahrain as well, because without the Saudi consent, they would never sign anything with Israel. So this Saudi Arabia, by the way, allowed El Al to fly above Saudi Arabia. This is why today the route to India, the route to Thailand of El Al is shortened by 2 or 3 hours of flight, which reduces the price. Okay, because formerly they had to go around Saudi Arabia, much longer route. So Saudi Arabia is some kind of in between consent about peace with Israel of others, yet they try to stay out of it, at least publicly. So this is more or less what we have. However, and here comes the big however, in the Middle East, politics are built on sand dunes. Sand dunes, which change their position according to Matzav Haruach.
That's the wind.
Matzav Ruach in Hebrew is 2 things. It's the situation of the wind, and it's also the mood. People's mood. Okay? We had official relations with Qatar. There was an official representation of Israel in Qatar with an Israeli flag in Doha, the capital of Qatar, between 1994 and 2000. They reversed it. The same thing with Tunisia. They reversed it. The same thing with Mauritania. They reversed it. Means in the Middle East, things, especially those things which are connected to Israel, are reversible. This is why we should take in account that the Abraham Accord could also be reversible if the Iranians will feel emboldened enough to demand that the Emirates reduce the relations with Israel. And this is something which can happen. Because if the Iranians are being encouraged by all kinds of countries in the world by lifting the sanctions, by all kinds of other goodies which they can get from all kinds of administrations, they might take advantage of the fact that they become again a member of the international family in order to reduce Israel's presence in the Gulf. They don't like it, and we have to take it in account.
So speaking of Iran, you are arriving from recently having been in Brussels, in Belgium, and where you addressed
2 weeks ago.
2 weeks ago, where you addressed the European Union on the issue of Iran. And so what do you want Europe, and what did you want Europe to know about Iran? What was the nature of your talk at
Well,
Brussels?
what I was invited to speak about is the minority rights in Iran. Iran, just like other countries in the Middle East, is not one nation. It's not one people. Because Iran is highly fragmented socially according to ethnic lines. Iran has no majority to any group. Iran is a country of minorities. The Persians are a minority, yet they rule over all the others. And the other minorities in Iran are Azerbaijanis, Kurds, Arabs, Baloch, Turkmens, Kashkais, Mazandaranis, Caspianis, Luris. Shall I continue? Do you hear about this? Do you hear about this in the Canadian media? No. People talk about Iranian people. The same thing like Iraq, Syria, others. There was never an Iranian nation. There are Iranian citizens, but not a nation. Because every group keeps its language, keeps its customs, live separately, because there are districts. I would show you the map. You know what? When you go home, Google Iran's ethnic groups. You'll find, and go to images. You'll find the maps in the internet of all these groups which I mentioned. The ruling group are the Persians, and all the others are coerced to accept them. And we saw recently, it took like more than a year, the demonstrations and fights in the streets, and most of the people of these nations demand freedom. Just like what happened with the Soviet Union. As you remember, the Soviet Union in 1989 was divided to 15 states. The independent states, based on ethnicities. Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Armenia. Okay, Ukraine has two groups. That's why there are wars over there. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. Okay, all these ethnic states. The same thing what happened with Yugoslavia, which today is 7 states. Serbia, Croatia, Montenegro, Slovenia, Macedonia. Okay, all these are ethnic groups. Czechoslovakia was also divided to 2 states, ethnic states. Czech Republic and the Slovak Republic. The same thing the Iranian nations want. Means the Arabs want independence, the Kurds, the Azerbaijanis, they want to be united with their brethren who are today liberated after the collapse of the Soviet Union in the independent Azerbaijan, which was once part of the Soviet Union. So they are already independent states since 1989. Their brethren who are now under the yoke of the Persians in Iran want also to be liberated and to be united with their brothers who are over 30 years free from the Soviet Union. Okay, and this is, by the way, the ancient capital of the Azerbaijanis is the city of Tabriz, which is in Iran. Why should the Iranians rule over the Azerbaijanis? Azerbaijanis speak Turkish and not Persian. And they are not allowed to teach in their schools in their own language. They have to teach in Persian. And many human rights are being violated by the Iranians. So this was the conference in Brussels, and the European Union now started to talk about human rights in Iran. And whoever tries to challenge the central government in Iran finds himself hung up from a crane in the street.
So on that note, do you think that there is any hope in the future for those who oppose the Iranian regime right now to have any success? Because we see these successive demonstrations that seem to take hold and then kind of lose power.
Historically, not even one empire, which included many ethnicities, survived forever. The Austro-Hungarian Empire fell apart, and today we have Romania, Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovak Republic. They are all once part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. The Soviet Empire fell apart according to ethnic lines. Yugoslavia, Czechoslovakia, all these ethnicities. And you know what? Is the United Kingdom really united? The Scots and the Welsh and the Irish and the English are united. Okay? Is Spain united with the Catalanis and Andalusis and the Basques and all the others? Okay, ethnicity is still alive. And you know what? Quebec, I'm not sure. I'm speaking about things which are real. I'm not inventing this issue. Ethnicity is alive and kicking. We might ignore it. We might, push it aside. Belgium, the state is divided to three groups: the Wallons who speak French, the Flames who speak Dutch, and Germans. And there are big differences, and everyone is from government and so forth. So ethnicity plays a role in Iran as well. So Iran one day will fall apart, inevitably. When will it happen? I have no idea. But it will happen. Hopefully when we still can see it. Just like what happened to other empires.
Our room here tonight is representative of Montreal Jewry, and Montreal Jewry is very connected, I think, historically to Israel. This room is full of people that are involved in support of Israel on one level or another. We are really in the presence of generous supporters of Israel, large and small. I see our good friend Menachem Dolphin, who recently founded the Montreal Jewish Teen Israel Experience at the Federation, in addition to his philanthropic work with Technion and Israel Bonds. And I know we have here people involved with Tel Aviv University, and our dear friend Irwin Beutel was very strongly involved with Magen David Adom. But traditionally, the Montreal community is very connected to Israel. At Chabad here, I don't know if you saw the sign when you came in, we've been busy with our youth leadership sending buses to Israel. Chabad of Westmount helped the Federation organize multiple youth groups to Israel, numbering hundreds of kids. And actually, my daughter is in Israel right now, leading a youth group. It's safe to say that overall, I think Jewish Montrealers love Israel. We're proud of Israel, and we also worry about Israel. And when Israel hurts, we tend to feel bad. And right now, I don't know if I'm speaking for myself or if I'm speaking for others, but having spoken to some friends, I think a lot of people are feeling confused about the conflict that's happening right now within Israeli society. As diaspora Jews, our job tends to be to kind of support Israel, and we certainly tend to be linear in how we see Israel, we always ask the question, is like, is it good for the Jews or is it bad for the Jews? And which side are we on? So when Israeli society is so fractured, I think it leaves us a bit confused. It's almost like we're the kid who loves his mother and his father, but we feel lost because they're fighting. So what can you tell us about the current upheaval in Israel? And can you untangle for us the situation regarding the judicial reforms and I guess the role of us here in the diaspora vis-a-vis that turmoil?
I try to be as objective as I can, which is not easy. What happened with the Zionist movement since the late 19th century, you know, the first Zionist conference was in 1897 in Basel, in the Musiksaal concert hall of Basel. And ever since then, the Zionist movement actually included two major trends within the Jewish people already then, towards the end of the 19th century. One side was the religious people, led by Rabbi Kalischer, for example, who was wholeheartedly Zionist, by the way, against other groups in the Jewish communities of those days. He believed in Zionism, and he encouraged everyone, especially those who are Bnei Torah, to join the Zionist movement and eventually to come to Israel as well. While the other side of the Zionist movement were people who did not consider themselves to be religious in our terms, but to be nationalistic, Jewish by nation, by birth, not by religion. Thanks for the Haskalah, is the enlightenment or the learning which was prevailing those days already within Jewish communities. Their motivation was not religious, their motivation was national, ethnic. Okay? The Zionist movement included or tried to combine these two trends and succeeded very well, because the movement remained united until this very day. Both sides of the Jewish people, the religious and the non-religious, the liberal I would say, which liberated itself from religion, yet Jewish by nation is good. However, what happened is that these two trends are actually become further and further from each other, to a degree that recent years we see big differences in the social characteristics of these two parts of the people in Israel. Non-religious people usually are lawyers, accountants, free professions, doctors. Religious, not to mention Haredi, are less, I would say, in these professions, other professions. We see differences in childbirth, in demography. More religious, especially Haredi communities, have high demography. Many children, grandchildren, and so forth. While liberal sectors in Israel, like in many other Western countries, if they get married, they have one child, two children, maybe three. When generation after generation, when you see the development, today in Israel, demographically, the Haredim plus religious plus traditional or Masoretic Jews combined are way much bigger than the liberal, secular sectors in Israel. And every 4 years, hopefully when we have elections, the differences are being more obvious, because the youngsters become bigger and they vote. This government, which was established in last January, represents actually the right side of the political system. Means Haredim, religious, and traditional, Masoretic, mostly Sfaradi. While the liberal sectors today are in their position. This is the democratic result of the elections, which were in November 1st last year. This development, demographic development, was already obvious 30 years ago, in the 90s. And the professor named Baruch Kimmerling wrote a little booklet under the title Ketz Shilton Ha'achusalim, the end of the rule of the Achusals. What is Achusals? It's a Rashi Tevot. It's initials of Ashkenazi, Chiloni means Ashkenazi, Chiloni means secular, Vatik means somebody who lived in the country for many years already, Samech is socialist, and Lamed is liberal. Means the end of the rule of these sectors, means the liberal sectors. He already saw the demographic development, and he was not a prophet, he saw the numbers, and he wrote this book. In the 1995, the Supreme Court became under the leadership of Aaron Barak, professor of law, who became the Supreme, the president of the Supreme Court after he was a judge and after he was the legal advisor of the government. He started to come out with verdicts of the Supreme Court, which actually were meant to endure the government of the Achusalim. Means by all kinds of precedents which he produced by verdicts, in order to make sure that the liberal sectors will forever rule the country, although they become a smaller and smaller minority in the Knesset. I won't elaborate about it, but he introduced all kinds of changes, like what people say, people are fighting on Piskat HaHistabrut. It means that a judge can have a decision not based on a law, but based on what he thinks that things should be appropriate or not. This is something which every judge can now do whatever he likes, because he thinks that something is not appropriate. Not based on the law, Aaron Barak decided this should be like a law, which was made by the Supreme Court. And more of this kind of verdicts, which actually give the court system, the prosecution, and the legal advisors actually the decision position in everything. Means people vote to the Knesset, but the Knesset cannot make any law against what the judges think. So who is the real government? Not the Knesset. It's the Supreme Court. So this is actually what the fight is. And this started already in the 90s. Not before the 90s. It started in the 90s. Now the government tries to turn the wheel backwards to create a situation where the Knesset will be the sovereign body because the Knesset is the elected parliament in Israel. Okay? This is from the right point of view. The left point of view says, what? What do you mean? Netanyahu faces the court. How can he make decisions about the court? He is now facing the court. He shouldn't be a prime minister to begin with. Okay, little by little, the witnesses which the prosecution brings turn out that they don't support the allegations against Netanyahu. And this is actually the situation. Already the judges told the sides that they will be very difficult to prove that he was bribed. This is one of the allegations. So they already gave up on bribery. Okay, little by little. The demonstrations are against the Minister of National Security, Ben Gvir, because he's right-wingish. The demonstrations are against any change in the court system and the liberties which the court system acquired or appropriated through the years. So this is actually the fight of the people who are concerned about the country. They say, means the demonstrators say that they are fighting for the democracy, while the government, or those who support the government, say that they are fighting in order to make sure that they govern the state, although they failed in the elections time and again, because of demography. So both sides have a point. Now what I did, I wrote a little article and I sent it to the president, Yitzhak Herzog. I know him personally. We served together. His brother was my classmate, and we served in the army together as well. And I know the family very well. I wrote him a letter, and I also made a clip out of it. And I told him, look, the only solution to this problem is to take 4 people. Aaron Barak, the one who designed the rule of the court already in the 90s, the Supreme Judge Esther Hayut, who is today the president of the Supreme Court, of the court system, Simcha Rotman, who is the head of the Law and Constitution Committee in the Knesset, who is for the changes, or to turn the wheel back, and Yariv Levin, the Minister of Justice, who also wants to change the system which the Supreme Court created. It means to take the 4 people who are the poles of the problem. The ultra-liberal Aaron Barak and Esther Hayut, and the ultra-conservative Simcha Rotman and Yariv Levin. The president should bring them to his home, lock them in a room, give them to drink, and if they want to go out to the men's room, they should first put under the door the agreement on all the points. Now these four people are bright, are clever lawyers. They know how to formulate everything. What they will agree, nobody will challenge. And this is the only way how to solve the problem. To lock them in one room, and if they want to go out, they should first agree on the solution between the two sides of this problem. He called me after he got this. He said, it's a bright idea. I don't know if I can do it. Means, don't hold your breath. And I think that he has the authority. Although it is not one of the missions of a president in Israel, because as you know, the president in Israel is only a symbolic figure. Okay, he is not executive like the president in the United States, or I don't know what happens here, but or in France.
Well, we have a governor general. That's kind of it.
Okay, we have prime minister to run the country. The president is only a symbolic figure, but he has I would say, the public authority, the aura, I would say. If he calls them to come to his home, I think that they will come. Because no one of these four will be willing to be viewed as the one who did not come to the president to solve the problem. And this is the only way, in my humble view, to bring both sides to an agreement by locking them in one room
until the cows come.
Until they the white smoke comes out.
Well, that deserves a round of applause right there. So this has been a really fascinating evening, and I think I speak for all of us that we could go on and on to ask so many questions. There's so many unanswered questions that I have to skip through because the time is moving forward. But of course, as Jews, we say that that we like to conclude in a positive vein. And we know that this week we are in the 9 days. And next week we commemorate Tisha B'Av, which is the commemoration of the destruction of the temple. And although we know that we have seen so much miracles in Israel, we've seen a real rebirth. I remember the first time that I came to Israel, I was walking in Jerusalem and I saw a sight that left a very strong impression on my consciousness. And it was children playing in the streets and elderly people who looked really advanced in age, like they had their sticks or their walkers, were sitting on benches and watching them play.
The prophecy.
And I remember when I saw this, a shiver went up my spine because there is a prophecy from Zechariah that says that Od Yeshuz Kenim Uskenot Berchovat Yerushalayim the Ish Mishanto Biyodem Rav Yamim, that there will be a time yet at the destruction of the temple that Jerusalem will be filled with people who were blessed to live long lives, so long that they need even a walking stick. Urchovat ha'ir yimalu yiladim v'iladot nisachatim be'urchavateha, that the streets will be filled with the children playing. And so we see the dreams, we see the promises, we see the miracles, and yet we're still mourning because we don't have complete peace, and we don't have the rebuilding of the Beit HaMikdash, which will be the symbol of world peace, Be'ezrat Hashem. So as we conclude in a positive vein, I just want to share two things. One, an observation that I saw you on Al Jazeera pronouncing very loudly that Jerusalem is the eternal capital of the Jewish people, and that Jerusalem or Al-Quds is not mentioned in the Quran even once. And I thought that was extremely brave. And I was wondering do you think that message is being accepted on any level? And then finally, I just, again, a closing that when we say the Eicha next week, God willing, we should not have to fast, that the world will be redeemed by then. But in the case that we do, we know that at the conclusion of Eicha, we say, Hashiveinu Hashem Elacha v'nashuva, Chadesh Yameinu Kikedem, God, return to us and we will return to you, and renew our days as old, meaning that we live with an eternal hope. And it is the eternal hope of an eternal people, and is the eternal hope and the refusal, I believe, to accept the status quo that is our greatest internal strength. So on that note, what is your greatest hope? Because we were talking about the difficulties right now in Israel, within the society. What is your greatest hope for Israel and also for Yerushalayim?
Well, we Jews know very well how to argue with each other. Because if you open the Gemara, the Talmud, most of it's arguments. How to define things, how to understand things, how to interpret all kinds of verses from the Torah or quotations from Mishnah. Yes, we, as we say, zwei Jiden, vier Dias. Two Jews have four opinions. Okay? Because every one of them has an opinion and the opposite opinion at one time. Okay? We are the Tarbut HaMachloket, the culture of dispute, is well rooted in our DNA. And what we see today in Israel is exactly this. Okay, it's a push and pull. Yet we try not to be violent vis-a-vis each other. We don't shoot each other. Hopefully, no, God forbid. We keep the way of the conduct as non-violent as possible. It has some problems, yet most of the people are not violent. And okay, this is democracy. Democracy allows demonstrations. Democracy allows protests. Definitely, people are don't have to sit at home for 4 years until the next elections. They have ways how to express their consent and the opposite as well. Yet, we should know how to live together in addition to the arguments. The army should not be part of the problem. And unfortunately, there are some people who announce that they are not going to the army because of some reservists who announce that they are not willing to volunteer to the army because of this legislation of which the government. In my humble view, the army should be out of any argument, because the army belongs to everybody. Everybody together. We fight together. Unfortunately, sometimes we get injured together, or more unfortunately, we get killed together. Okay? And the cemeteries never defined or never distinguished between religious or non-religious, between those who live in the so-called occupied territories or Tel Aviv. By the way, Tel Aviv by the Arabs is viewed as occupied territory as well. So we've never made any difference in the army. The army should be kept aside, should be kept out of every dispute about laws, about other things in the country. And this is what I hope, because as long as we keep the army intact, the Israeli deterrence vis-a-vis our neighbors, and there are some in our neighborhood who do not like us, like Hezbollah, like Hamas, like Iran, like others, and they see whatever they see, and they, the jihadi glands are starting to work in their bodies. And we sense it. We see it in Lebanon, we see it with Hamas, we see it with others. Because they interpret what they see in the media in a way which Israel is going to collapse, as if. We know, I think that the Israeli people know the limits, know that the fight at the end of the day should be peaceful, should be democratic, in order to convince each other. Nobody wants to destroy the country, nobody wants to lose the country, and I do hope that this dispute will come to an end and will succeed to continue life in Israel as we did already more than 75 years.
Thank you very much. I want to take this opportunity to thank you. First of all, your wealth of knowledge is absolutely mind-boggling and very inspiring. Your expertise and your sense of humor is fantastic and really has made this a riveting and enlightening evening. Do not leave yet. So on behalf of all of us here, please join me in thanking Professor Dr. Kedar for sharing his wisdom with us and for coming here tonight. So on behalf of everyone, thank you. And I also would like to call upon my husband, Rabbi Shanowitz, to close the evening formally and to thank you personally.
Professor Kedar, that was a fantastic talk that you gave.
Thank you so much.
And I really have learned so much. I could listen to you for hours. And all of us here tonight, we're going to be walking away more informed, more enlightened, and even more hopeful.
Thank you.
More strengthened. And your talk is so great because you don't only point out the problems, you give real solutions. And we pray and hope for the ultimate solution with Mashiach.
Thank you.
But I would just like to give you a small token of appreciation, and that's a book that I released recently on the Pirkei Avot called Starting with Sinai. So,
Thank you so much.
hope you enjoy it. Of course. And to everybody else here in the audience, thank you all for coming, and we look forward in seeing more of you in the future with many more Irwin Beutel lecture series coming.
I just want to conclude with a prayer as we are in the 9 days that Sheyibana Beit HaMikdash B'mehera V'yameinu B'tei Chakeinu B'Toratecha, and an observation that when I was in Israel multiple times, it is impossible to be there and not to see the miracle and not to see the dream. And I think the only place that I felt something lacking was at the Kotel, because I kept looking at the other side, knowing how great the whole world could be if there was a house of prayer that the prophets say will be a house of prayer that Beiti Beit Tefillah Yikar L'chol Ha'amim, that my house will be a house of prayer for all the nations, and it will be a symbol of world peace and brotherhood, and that's what we all pray for, and that's what we all have prayed for as Jews. This is why we are in the 9 days of reflection, and that's what we're going to fast, and hopefully may this be the last fast, and next year may we celebrate Yerushalayim HaBenuya, completely Benuya, with lots of good health and hope and blessing in each and of our lives, and a special blessing to our special guests, Dr. and Devorah Kedar, for your beautiful visit here, and wishing you lots of success in your future endeavors, and may you go from strength to strength. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.